The fabric did not just feel like silk, it felt like skin that had been cured and smoothed by decades of secrets. I found it tucked away in a corner of a cramped shop in Binondo, where the air smelled of dust, rotting wood, and the metallic tang of old copper. The owner, a woman whose face was a road map of deep wrinkles, didn't look at me when I reached for it. She simply gestured toward the counter with a trembling hand. It was a dress of heavy, midnight blue silk, heavy enough to hang with a weight that felt intentional. It had intricate beadwork along the collarbone, tiny glass beads that caught the flickering light like dying eyes. I bought it without thinking about why I wanted it so badly. The moment I touched it, my fingers prickled as if exposed to a static charge. I took it home to my apartment in Quezon City, where the humidity of the city made everything feel slightly damp and heavy. I hung it in my bedroom, letting it sway in the stagnant air. That night, I didn't sleep well. The silence of the house felt thick, as if the walls were absorbing the sound of my breathing. I kept thinking about the weight of the fabric against my skin. The next morning, I decided to try it on. I chose a day when the sun was high and the heat made me crave something elegant for an evening gathering. I stepped into the silk and it slid over my hips like a caress. It fit perfectly, not just well fitted, but as if it had been tailored specifically for my measurements, even though it was decades old. The waist nipped in exactly where I needed it, and the hem hit the floor with a soft, heavy thud. When I looked in the mirror, I felt a strange sense of completeness. It was as if the dress were holding me together. The party was held at a private residence in San Juan. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and expensive gin. People moved through the garden like ghosts in the moonlight, their laughter muffled by the heavy humidity. I wore the dress, feeling the weight of it on my shoulders. It felt protective. When I walked through the crowd, I noticed people pausing to look at me. They didn't just look at the dress. They looked at me with expressions that fluctuated between confusion and profound sadness. It was near the buffet table when a woman stopped in front of me. She was older, her hair bleached gray by years of stress. She gripped my arm so hard I felt her nails dig into my skin. Her eyes were wide, glassy with something that looked like terror mixed with awe. "You have to wear it every night," she whispered, her voice cracking like dry timber. "You shouldn't have taken it from the shop." I laughed nervously, thinking she was perhaps just eccentric or had enjoyed too much wine. I told her it was a beautiful piece of vintage clothing. She didn't laugh back. Her grip tightened until my arm went numb. "They say the woman who wore it before you never found her way home. She vanished in 1984, and people still look for her under the floorboards and behind the walls. You don't know what stays with a thing when the person is gone." I brushed her off politely, attributing her words to the paranoia of a stranger. But that night, when I returned home, the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. It grew heavy, like a physical weight on my chest. I took the dress off and hung it on the hook behind my bedroom door. I fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of long, dark hallways where the walls bled something thick and sweet-smelling like rotting fruit. I woke up at 3 in the morning. The air in the room was freezing, despite the tropical heat outside. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I sat up and looked toward the door. The hook was empty. I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked toward the door. The dress wasn't on the hook. It was on my bed, perfectly folded as if it had been placed there by a meticulous hand. The silk looked darker in the moonlight, almost black enough to swallow the light around it. My breath hitched in my throat. I hadn't moved from my bed since I fell asleep. How could it have moved? I threw myself onto the bed and grabbed the fabric. It was cold ice cold, as if it had been kept in a freezer. As my fingers touched the silk, I heard a sound from the corner of the room. It was a soft, wet clicking noise, like teeth hitting together. I froze, afraid to move, afraid that any sound would draw whatever made that noise toward me. I forced myself to stand and walk toward the bathroom to splash water on my face. The mirror was fogged with a thin layer of condensation, despite the lack of steam from the shower. I wiped a circle in the glass with my palm. For a moment I saw only my own panicked face. Then the reflection shifted. For a fraction of a second, the woman in the mirror wasn't me. She was gaunt, her skin sallow and stretched tight over her cheekbones. Her hair was matted and greasy, and she was wearing the midnight blue dress. Her eyes were wide and sunken, staring at me with a look of desperate, pleading hunger. Then it flickered back to my own face. I gasped, stumbling backward against the bathroom door. I stayed there for an hour, huddled on the floor, listening to the house groan. The silence was no longer empty. It felt occupied. It felt as though the shadows in the corners were leaning in toward me, curious about my presence and their space. The next morning, the dress was back on the hook. It looked innocent, a piece of fabric from another era, but I could see the faint indentations where the beads sat against the silk. They looked like bruises. I tried to call the woman from the party, but her number was disconnected. I tried to go back to the shop in Binnen, but the space was gone. In its place was a gray wall of corrugated metal and a sign that read out of order. I stopped wearing the dress for 3 days. During those 3 days, the room grew colder. The smell of rot became more pronounced, lingering near the door where I hung the garment. Every night I would wake up to find the dress on my bed, folded perfectly, as if it were waiting for me to acknowledge it. It was a silent demand. Each time I found it, the silk seemed slightly tighter, the beads appearing sharper and more jagged. On the 4th night, I couldn't bear the tension anymore. The feeling of being watched had turned into the sensation of being hunted. I took the dress out and threw it into a heavy trash bag. I tied it shut with thick twine and shoved it into the back of my closet, burying it under old blankets and coats. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the center of my bed, clutching a flashlight like a weapon. At dawn, I heard something moving in the hallway. It wasn't a footstep. It was a dragging sound, heavy and rhythmic. Slide, thud, slide, thud. It sounded like something heavy being pulled across the tile floor. I grabbed my phone and walked into the hall. The light of the screen illuminated the corridor. There was nothing there, but the air smelled of old copper and wet earth. When I returned to my room and opened the closet, the blankets were tossed aside. The trash bag was sitting in the middle of the floor, torn open. The dress was not inside the bag. It was draped over the chair facing my bed. I looked different. The midnight blue silk seemed to pulse with a dull internal light. I didn't want to touch it, but my hand moved as if pulled by a wire. I reached out and grabbed the fabric. It wasn't cold this time, it was hot. It burned my skin like a brand. I screamed as the room began to spin. The walls seemed to stretch outward, the ceiling rising until it was lost in shadow. I felt something grab my wrist. The grip was like iron, and the skin felt like dry leather. I looked down and saw fingers long, gray, and spindly wrapped around mine. They weren't coming from the dress. They were emerging from the fabric itself. I threw myself backward onto the bed, and the world dissolved into a cacophony of whispers. Hundreds of voices spoke at once in a language that sounded like grinding stones. I felt something heavy sit on my chest, pinning me down. The weight was immense, as if someone with the density of lead had sat upon my ribs. I looked up toward the ceiling, and for a moment the veil thinned. I saw her. She wasn't just in the mirror anymore, she was in the room. She stood over me, her face a mask of agony. Her eyes were hollow pits. She wasn't trying to hurt me, she was trying to pull something out of me. The shadow began to move into my body. I felt a coldness seep into my chest, traveling through my veins like ice water. My lungs felt heavy, as if they were filling with silt. Every time I tried to inhale, the air turned to ash in my throat. The woman over me let out a long, mournful wail that cracked the glass of the window behind her head. The next morning, I did not wake up on my bed. I woke up on the floor, my limbs heavy and unresponsive. My neighbor found me 3 days later when the smell of decay began to drift through the vents. When the police arrived, they found the room mostly as it had been, but with one glaring exception. The dress was nowhere to be found. There were no signs of a struggle, no signs of an intruder. The only thing out of place was the mirror in the hallway. It had cracked down the center, and when the officers looked into it, they didn't see their own reflections clearly. They saw a flicker of blue silk moving behind the glass. I am not in that room anymore. I am in the silk. I can hear the neighbors talking, their voices muffled as if they are underwater. I can feel the weight of my own body becoming distant, like a memory fading at the edges. I see them looking at me through the mirror, but they can only see a woman who looks just like me, shivering and pale. I am waiting for the next person to walk into the shop in Binnen. I am waiting for the next pair of hands to feel my skin and think it is silk. Every night, I fold myself neatly. I wait on the bed, perfectly still until someone finds me. I am the dress now. The blue is my skin, the beads are my eyes, and the only thing I can do is hold the space for the next soul to enter. The room is silent now, but if you stand very still near the mirror in that hallway, you might hear the soft, rhythmic sound of someone breathing behind the glass, waiting for the silk to feel warm again. The next time a woman puts on the gown, she won't see me in the reflection. She will only see herself, and I will be pulled deeper into the threads, becoming one with the weave until there is nothing left of me but the color of the night. The city continues its pulse outside, indifferent to the transition of souls. The shop remains a ghost of a place, appearing only to those who are looking for something they cannot name. And in the apartment, the mirror reflects only the empty space where I used to be, the cracks holding the memories of my screams like lines in a poem. The dress is beautiful. It fits perfectly. It waits. Every night it sits on the bed, folded with intention. It knows who is coming. It feels the vibration of footsteps in the hall. When the door opens and the light hits the silk, it prepares to receive the next guest. The cycle does not break, it only weaves tighter. I can see them now, the investigators, the neighbors, the people who pass by my door. They see a girl in a dress of midnight blue, looking haunted but beautiful. They don't know that her eyes are the same color as the glass beads on her collar. They don't know that she isn't moving because she is held in place by the weight of a century of stolen breaths. The air in the room stays still. The dust motes hang like tiny insects in the light, and when the sun sets, the silk begins to hum, a low-frequency vibration that only those who are lost can hear. It is the sound of the fabric settling into its skin. It is the invitation. One day, someone will walk into that apartment and find me lying on the floor, my face pale as marble. They will think I am part of the decor, a tragedy captured in a moment of stillness. They will pick me up, and they will feel the silk against their palms. And then, we will trade places in the reflection. The mirror is the only truth left. It shows the girl who was here yesterday, and it shows the woman who will be here tomorrow. The transition is seamless. The seam of the dress is hidden by the beads. There is no difference between the silk and the skin. There is only the long, cold night of the fabric that never forgets a face. I am listening to the footsteps in the hallway again. They are closer now. I can hear the click of a key in the lock. The door creaks open, and the scent of outside air-wet asphalt and jasmine floods into the room. A woman stands in the doorway, her eyes searching the shadows. She sees my face in the mirror and thinks it is a trick of the light. She walks toward me. Her hand reaches out to touch the fabric on the bed. I feel the heat of her pulse as she nears. The silk responds. It begins to tighten around my phantom limbs, preparing to let go. The reflection in the glass blurs, melting like wax under a flame. The woman enters the room and sits beside me. She looks at the dress and sighs, a sound of longing so deep it vibrates in my bones. She doesn't know that I am about to step into her skin, and she is about to become the thread. The trade is beginning. I can see her hand reach for the zipper. It's not a zipper, it's a pull of fate. As her fingers touch the spine of the gown, my consciousness surges forward. I feel my lungs expand with air that isn't mine. I feel the weight of her bones on my frame. The transition is a roar of white noise in my head. Then there is only silence. The woman sits up and gasps, looking at her hands. She sees them for the first time, the way they are trembling, the way the skin looks like it was stitched together by needles made of moonlight. She looks into the mirror. For a second, she sees me. I am the one in the reflection now. I am the girl with the haunted eyes trapped behind the silvered glass, screaming into a void that only reflects my own agony. She touches her throat and feels the beads. They aren't jewelry anymore, they are part of her. She looks at the dress on the floor, the old, tattered thing I left behind. It looks like a husk, a discarded shell. She doesn't realize it is me. She just thinks it's a piece of cloth that no longer fits. She turns away from me, and the mirror goes dark. The next person who walks through that door will see her. They will see a woman in a midnight blue dress, looking perfectly content, as if she has always belonged to the silk. And I will remain in the glass, watching the world turn gray, waiting for the next time someone looks deep enough into the reflection to find me. The house is quiet again. The only sound is the ticking of a clock that stopped in 1984. The air stays thick with the smell of old copper and dust. On the bed, the dress sits perfectly folded, its silk glowing like a bruise in the moonlight. It waits for the next cycle to begin, a patient predator of identity, draped in blue and heavy with the weight of those who came before. The shadow in the corner of the room grows long as the moon moves across the sky. It isn't a shadow, it's a space where something used to be. The reflection in the mirror doesn't move when the wind blows, but if you look closely at the edges of the frame, you can see the movement of lips that aren't speaking words, but merely trying to form a name that no one is left to hear. I am here. I am there. I am the thread and the needle. I am the silk and the skin. The dress doesn't just fit, it consumes. And every night when the light fades, the reflection and the reality swap places like a coin tossed in the air, landing on whichever side is heaviest with sorrow. The city outside continues its frantic pace, but inside this room, time has folded in on itself. The girl from Mansion 84 is still here. She's just harder to see now, buried under layers of silk and the repetition of a century's whim. She is the shadow in the corner. She is the chill in the air. She is the reason the mirror is cracked. Someone will come for me eventually. They will find the note I left on the table, written in a hand that isn't mine but was forced by my ghost. It will say, "Do not look into the glass, do not touch the silk," but they will touch it. They always touch it, because beauty is a lure and the dress is the most beautiful thing in the world. It sits on the bed, waiting for its next host. The beads are polished by the oils of 1,000 hands. The silk is seasoned by the sweat of 1,000 fears. It is ready. The next girl will find it in a shop or at a party or in a dream. She will put it on and feel it fit perfectly. She will look into the mirror and see herself for the first time in years. And I will be the one smiling back from the glass, my face a mask of joy that isn't mine, as I watch her slowly start to fade. The cycle is complete. The dress remains. The reflection shifts. The silence grows deeper. In the shop in Binnen, a new rack of clothes appears in the corner, and the owner's hands tremble as she hangs a piece of midnight blue silk that seems to hum with a life of its own. It waits for the next pair of eyes to find it, the next pair of hands to touch it, the next soul to call it home. I am no longer screaming. I have learned to love the silence of the fabric. I have learned the rhythm of the weave. I am just a woman in a dress now, and the only thing that matters is the weight of the silk against my skin. It is heavy, yes, but it is also steady. It keeps me together when the world tries to pull me apart. The mirror doesn't show what I am, it shows what I have become. A specter in a gown of old secrets, a whisper in the hall of memories. The next one will find her way. She will hear the call of the silk. She will see the beauty of the blue, and we will share the reflection for one more night, until the sun rises and the world forgets that two women are trapped inside a single piece of cloth. The dress is waiting. The room is cold. The mirror is cracked. All that remains is the sound of the heart beating against the ribcage, muffled by the thick, heavy silk that feels so very much like home. The next girl will find it. She will wear it, and she will become me, just as I became her. The trade is always fair. The fabric never lies. The light in the hallway flickers once, and then goes out completely. In the darkness, the dress on the bed seems to pulse. It breathes. It waits for the next morning when a new face will appear in the glass, and a new voice will be swallowed by the silk, becoming another layer of shadow in the curtain of the night. The cycle is not a choice, it is a garment. You don't put on a dress to become someone else. You put it on because the world has already decided who you are meant to be, and I have been this dress for so long that I can no longer remember my own name, only the sensation of the silk and the way the beads feel against my collarbone like teeth. I am here. I am here. I am here. The words are lost in the fabric, muffled by the weight of the blue. If you find it, do not wear it, but you will. You'd always want to know how something so beautiful can make you feel so complete. Just remember that when you look in the mirror and see a stranger's eyes, it is only because I am looking back at you through mine. The door opens. A new girl enters. She sees the silk. She hears the hum. She walks toward the bed, her hand reaching out to touch the masterpiece of old craftsmanship. The thread is pulled. The needle moves. And for a moment the world stands still as two souls trade places in the fold of the fabric.